Hello, welcome to Unity Tutorial 2 in our Unity tutorial series. Uh, in this lesson, we'll be making a door with a key. Um, so basically, how it's going to work is, let's erase this. So if we have our ground, so this is our level, and this is our player. So we're going to put up a wall. We're going to put up two walls, like so. And we're going to put a cube in the middle. Just a little cube. That's going to be our door. Now, we're also going to add a sphere to our level. And actually, the door and the sphere should be the same color. That's just a little game design idea. So you know that the sphere and the door go together. So what will happen is the player will walk into the sphere, pick up the sphere, it'll disappear, and that means the player will have it. And then when the player approaches the door, they'll be able to, the door will disappear and they'll be able to walk through. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to use something called a trigger. And so a trigger, remember on our sphere, or on any object that we add, like our cube, it's going to have this green, make it lighter, it's going to have this green invisible outline, which is its bounds, its collider. And so its collider means like things can't pass through it, right? So the reason you can't go through these walls isn't because they're red and cute, but it's because this invisible green collider lets our player's collider know that we can't pass through there. The door will have one too. So what we can do is we can set this collider, or we can add another collider to an object and make it bigger. That is called a trigger. Okay? And so what a trigger does is when one collider enters or exits that trigger collider, somewhere in our code, a line of code runs, or a block of code runs. So we'll have in a method called onTriggerEnter, what will happen is when the player passes into the collider of the sphere, onTriggerEnter will run, and we'll we'll let the key know that it's been picked up, and we'll also make the key disappear. Okay, we're going to use the same basic idea with the door also, but first let's set up the key. So let's open up Unity. So here's my Unity, and I'm going to make my door and my key yellow. So I'm going to create material, my materials folder, call it yellow. Go over here and give it a yellow color. Okay. And so let's set up our key first. So the key is just going to be a sphere. Later we can replace it with art. But for now, we just have a key that's a sphere. So here's our sphere. I'm going to name it key. And I'm going to add yellow to it. Okay. I added yellow, just dragged yellow over to this gray spot. Okay, so here is our key, and I'm going to put it close to that. Okay, so just to point out, the sphere is a sphere because it has a sphere collider, a sphere mesh, and a mesh renderer, which gives its color over its shape here. It also has a transform, which includes its position, its rotation, which to rotate a sphere doesn't do much, and its scale. And I'm actually going to choose the scale tool and bring it down so it's tiny. How about 0.4 in each direction in the X, Y, and Z scale, and then I'll switch to the arrows, move it down. Okay, so here, this will be our little key. So let's make a script for it before we do anything else. So we have a third-person controller script in the script folder. Let's you can right-click and go to Create C# script, or you can click on Create C# script. I'm going to add a key script. Okay. And so what this is doing is it's creating a key class, right? So if we double click on key script, it's going to open up MonoDevelop. And our key actually isn't going to use the update method or the start method. Okay, so if we click on this first curly bracket for our class definition, you can see we just have an empty body. Okay, so inside the body of the class, we're going to add the special method onTriggerEnter. Okay, so first just set up your method like so. I always like to just set up my methods with a little space because this is the method body. So inside of here is where our inside of the method, so in between these curly brackets in here, is what's going to happen when something enters the trigger of our key. Okay, so this is the basic method. OnTriggerEnter actually needs one argument, and that's collider other, and we give it a name other. And so what other is it's whatever collider enters the trigger. So it's going to be our player, most likely. So I'm going to delete this comment. So the first thing we want to do is we want to check to make sure, in fact, what is entering our trigger is the player. So we're going to do that with an if statement. So first I'm just going to set up our if statement. And if statements are kind of like methods. It's if, and then two parentheses, two curly braces, and then inside the parentheses of an if statement is called the conditional. So the conditional has to be true or false. So we want to check to see if the other, and we want to check its game object. We want to check that game object's tag. So other.gameObject.tag. We want to make sure it equals player. And this is a capital P, and I'm going to show you where I'm getting this, okay? So OnTriggerEnter, if the thing entering the trigger is game object has a tag player. So if we go back to Unity, and we click on the player, so here's the player's collider, so that's the other, right? Collider, other. So when the player enters the trigger, this collider becomes the other, and we check this collider's game object. So a game object, to kind of review here, is everything is a game object in the scene. Okay, so the light is a game object, the ground is a game object, the player is a game object, cube, key. So if we create an empty game object, you can see it's just called game object. At its base, a game object has a couple things. It has a transform, it has a tag, it has a layer, it has a name, and it's active or inactive, right? Okay. So we're checking the tag on the game object of the collider entering. So I'm going to delete this game object. So if we click on player, when the collider enters, we're going to check its game object, which is the whole thing. So the collider is just part of our player. It's an important part, but it's just part. So we're going to check the game object it's attached to, and then we're going to check its tag. And so we need to set the player's tag to player, right? So now that it's tagged player, we can check that tag whenever anything enters, and as long as it's the player can pick up the key. So now we need to do the code that will make it pick it up. So if I go back to monodevelop and check out our key script, so if other.gameObject.tag equals player, so if it's the player, we want this key to be marked as picked up. So we're going to create a property up here at the top, which is a bool called picked up. And we're going to say false, right? Because the key is going to start on the ground. It's not picked up. So if other.gameObject.tag equals player, picked up equals true. Okay? So let's make this public just so we can watch it happen. Okay, so we're going to say public bool picked up equals false. If other gameObject.tag equals player, picked up equals true. So let's go back to Unity, and so let's test this out. And it's not going to work. I'll show you why. So here we are. We walk over, and we're kind of bumping on top of the key, right? That's because the collider is still a normal collider. We can jump over it too. So if we click on the key, notice, oh, and we didn't add the key script either. So let's add the key script. So we click on the key, click add component, and type key, and there's our script, and there's our picked up bool. So if we hit play, and we run to the key, boom, nothing, not getting picked up, right? That's because our collider, sphere collider, and let's zoom in on it, sphere collider, which is this green outline, needs to be set is trigger. So if that set is trigger, now it doesn't like a normal collider, it just reacts when the player walks into it. Okay, or it just reacts. It just runs this code when anything enters it. Okay, so let's hit play. Now, if we walk over to the key, watch what's going to happen right over here. Picked up. So it says we picked up the key, but the key is still sitting there, right? So here's what we want to do. We want to make this disappear. The way we're going to do that is, and I'll show you, we're going to set the key's whole game object to inactive. So notice when I uncheck this check mark here, everything disappears. So we can uncheck that check mark in code. And the way we're going to do that is, back in our code, we're going to say picked up equals true, and then we're going to say game object. So game object means the game object attached to the key, not attached to other, right? Another way we can do this is say this dot game object. So this means like this key's game object, but we're saying the key's game object. We're going to set it active, and that takes a bool. So it either takes a true or false. We want to deactivate it, so we're going to say false. And don't forget your semicolon at the end of the line there. Got one here too. Okay, so game object dot set active false. And what that's going to do is it's going to uncheck this check mark. So watch this check mark and watch the picked up check mark. So we're going to walk over to the key. So picked up, unchecked, it's gone. So now we've picked up our key. Okay, so now we need to do the door. Now the way we're going to do this, first let's make a wall. So I'm just going to arrange these cubes. I'm just going to increase their size, increase their height, one there, increase the width, increase the height, need a little doorway, and then let's rename these. So wall, okay, and now let's just duplicate this. So we duplicate with Control D, maybe Command D on Mac. I'll get back to you on that. And let's change this name to door. And so if we move door, so we have door selected. If we move door, it's just another one of these red cubes. So let's change its scale. So switch to scale. Make it skinny. Make it not so wide. You can kind of go in now. So we know there's no gaps. And then let's set its color. So let's go to our materials, set its color. Same color as the key. And that is just going to let the players know that this key goes with this door. So now we need to make a script for our door, because right now our door is just a cube. Nothing makes this a door. We just named it a door, but it's just a box collider and a mesh renderer. So it's no different than our wall, except the color. Okay. So in order to make this a real door, we need to give it a script. So let's go to our scripts folder, create C# script, name it door. Okay. And let's open this up. So door is going to work very similar to key. Okay. So let's delete the start and update methods. We don't need those. Let's add our OnTriggerEnter method. Notice OnTriggerEnter has the O, the T, and the E capitalized, and there's no spaces. So this is in what's called Pascal case. Every word has the first letter capitalized. And we need our argument, so collider. And what we're gonna do here, and I'll zoom in a little here. What we're gonna do here is we're gonna say if other.gameObject.tag, oops, not GUI text, .tag equals player. And you remember how that works? We're just gonna say GameObject.setActive false. Okay. So for now, let's just test to make sure this works. Okay. So let's go back. Let's click on our door. Let's add component door. So now we have our door script, and then we do is trigger, hit play, and let's walk into it. Bing. Okay, cool. So here's the thing, and I'm gonna remove the door script really quick. I'm just right here improving. If something is set to is trigger, it no longer collides, so we can just walk through it. So we want our door to have a trigger, but also still have collision. So let's unset this from is trigger, add component. Let's add a new box collider. So I just clicked add component, searching for box, there's box collider. So now we have two box colliders, okay? and one of them can be trigger. So we'll set the second one to trigger, but we want to make sure that it extends out in front of the door a little bit. So there's actually somewhere to enter the trigger, because right now you can't enter the trigger because the collider's in the way. So we're just going to make its, so this blue arrow is the z-axis. We're going to make its z-axis size 3. Let's make it 4. So you can see now that if I turn off the mesh renderer, we have a collider, that's the physics collider, that's this first box collider, inside a bigger trigger. Okay, so when the player enters this trigger, it will make this go away, which for now, oops, I didn't turn the graphics back on. For now, that doesn't really matter much. I mean, because it's just going to disappear as soon as we get close. Oh, oops, I didn't put the door script back on. So this isn't a door anymore. So let's add the door. Okay, so now when I get close, you're going to see I enter the trigger, the door disappears. Okay, you can see it's getting set inactive. So that's good, but we want to make sure that the player picks up the key first. So let's open up the door and let's add a property at the top. It's going to be public, so we can assign it in the inspector. And its type isn't going to be bool or float. It's going to be key. So when you make a new class, your class becomes a type. So that's how we communicate between scripts. So we're going to say my key, and my key is written in camel case, which means the first letter is lowercase, and then the first letter of every word afterward is uppercase. So that's why that K is capitalized and the M is not. So we're going to say my key. Now what we want to do is we want to check to see if my key has been picked up. So when the player enters the trigger, first we're going to make sure it's the player. Then we're going to see if the key's been picked up. So if key, oops, not key, key's the type, we need to reference our specific key. So my key dot picked up. Remember picked up? So there's picked up. So if picked up equals true, and then a curly bracket. And so we want the second curly bracket, and this might get a little confusing, but we want the second curly bracket to wrap around this because we don't want this to be deactivated unless this is true. But we also want it to stay inside of this one, okay? So I'm just going to go below this, hit enter, and put my second curly bracket. And so you notice here's the if statement. That's the whole if statement. This is what's inside the if statement right here. So between these is this, and then this is that whole if statement. And then that if statement is inside this if statement, which begins here and ends here. So you can see all of this is inside of this if statement. And then this whole if statement is inside our onTriggerEnter method. So something to start trying to get used to is the idea of these many nested curly brackets, right? And it helps to click on them and you can see who its partner is. But that's why I don't normally like to, I like to type my whole if statement and do the brackets and then fill in what goes inside there just to keep it clear. So now if my key is picked up, now we can open the door. So let's go back to Unity and we're going to get a little my key slot here. And so my key, we can either assign it with this target or we can take key, we can drag it onto key. And as long as key has the key script on it, which it does, these are now linked together. So this key and this door are now linked together. Okay? So now we hit play. We walk up to the door, can't enter, right? It's locked. Well, shoot. This looks helpful. Grabbed it, and bing, now we're through the door. So because the key is specifically locked to the door, or specifically linked to the door, we now have a door and key set. So you can make another door and key set and have the door go somewhere else and have a separate key. You could also drag the same key into 2 different doors, my key slot, and that key could open multiple doors. So it's a pretty flexible system. Now, it's not very flashy. There's no art. This doesn't really look like a key, so that might be a little confusing. So you might want to find some key art online. But for now, it works, right? We know this little sphere is a key. We know this is a door. The functionality works. We know that our game is working. So yeah, that's all for now. I'm going to save my scene with Control S or File, Save Scene. And yeah, that's everything.